Hello everybody, I'm Chris Callahan, also known as Mr. C, and today we're going to talk about En Passant. Let me just be honest with you guys. En Passant is the thing that I least like teaching people. I really don't like teaching it. I wish I didn't have to. If I never had to teach it to anybody again, I would be so happy. But the fact that I'm teaching it to you anyway should show you how important it is. Alright, well, I won't build it up anymore. I guess the easiest thing to do is just show you what it is and what it looks like, and then from there I can explain how it works and why. So, let's play some pawn moves. I want you to know before I get into this software I'm using only lets me play legal moves. For example, I can't move a knight like that. I can't move this bishop here, and it won't let me. It only lets me play moves that you are really allowed to play. The reason I'm telling you that is because when I show En Passant to people, their first reaction is very often to not believe it's a real rule. So when you see me do this, this is not just something I'm making up to mess with you or joking with you. This is a real chess rule. Anyway, here we go. Pawn to e4. Let's make some pawn moves. Maybe black will go here, then black goes here. And we have reached the moment for En Passant. I can take this pawn right here. Pawn takes d6, En Passant. So if you've never seen En Passant before, you're probably very confused right now. And I understand why. That pawn I took it by going to a square that it wasn't on. I guess that's still diagonal, so that part's correct. But the pawn was on d5. Why am I taking it by going to d6? Now, before I get too much into why this is a rule, I should explain exactly how it works. So here's the rule. Okay, if a pawn goes two squares, it has to be the enemy pawn goes two squares, on the very next move, it can't be later, if you have a pawn, it has to be a pawn, if you have a pawn that could have taken it, if it had gone one, you can take it as if it went one. Do you see how, if this pawn had gone one, me taking it would not be such a big surprise. It wouldn't confuse you very much. That's normal. But when it goes two, on the next move, I can take it as if it went one. I think it's useful to go through the ways that people usually get this wrong, and it will help you figure out the right way. So for example, let's say that black puts this pawn here. Can I take it with the bishop En Passant? Well, no, of course not, because only other pawns can take En Passant. Another way that people get confused very often is they think anytime that two pawns are beside each other, you can do En Passant, and that is not correct. So for example, if this pawn goes here, can I take En Passant? No. And the reason is it was not after a pawn going two squares. You can only play En Passant if the move before, directly before, was a pawn going two squares. Another thing that people forget is that it has to happen on the very next move. So, for example, in the position we were looking at, let's say I played some other move with white and then black played some other move. Well, now the opportunity is gone. Now it's not going to let me take En Passant because you can only do it on the very next move. Now, I suppose I have to explain why this is a rule because it's a very complicated rule and it doesn't come up very often. What's the point of it even? Why would anyone make this rule? Well, it has to do with the last time that there were major rule changes in chess. You see, if you got in your time machine and went back 100 years ago and played chess with people, you'd be just fine. All the pieces move the same. Everything's the same. 200 years ago, you'd be fine. 300 years ago, you'd be fine. 500 years ago, you might have a problem. Because 500 years ago was the last big rule change for the game of chess. So the rules they added, the three big ones anyway, were castling. They changed how the queen moved. They let her go all the way to the other side of the board. And they added the pawn's double move. On its first move, it could go two. And that last one caused some problems. So take a look at the two pawns that I have here. And notice that if these pawns move one at a time, they can't get past each other without one having the chance to take the other. If white's pawn moves here, black gets a chance to take. If black's pawn moves here, then white's pawn gets a chance to take. Now, if the pawns can go two, this changes. Let me show you what I mean. This pawn could be inching up. We'll assume white is making moves somewhere. And when it gets to here, white can go 2 and skip right past the black pawn, and neither pawn had a chance to take the other. To the people 500 years ago, this was crazy. This just could not be. This was totally unfair. And the way that they fixed it is with en passant. Because if you have en passant, after that pawn skips right past you, you can fix it by taking it anyway. Well, I hope that made some sense. I know it's a lot to take in, but that's en passant. The good news is it doesn't come up very often. It does come up once in a while, but hopefully when it does come up, you'll be ready to go. That's all I got. Goodbye.